Okay, Boker Tov. Today's daf is Yud Gimel. We pick up on the middle of Yud Bet and Bet. We're just about to get started. All right, Boker Tov. Okay, so it's daf is Yud Gimel, and we pick up on Yud Bet and Bet, and we pick up about let's see, um, um, we pick up. Okay, so. About 4 lines down in the middle-sized line, and we 3 lines down in the middle-sized line. Um, so, um, Ma'on Shabo Kitot. Now we're listing the different types of heavens that there are and what happens in each heaven. And we're in the middle. I'm a little either on 4 or 5, and we're up to Ma'on. So we just had Zavul, which is used in the Nevi'im to refer to God's dwelling place, which is used by Shlomo to refer to the Beis HaMikdash. But another verse is used to refer to God's dwelling place on high, and the Gemara combines the two and refers to it as the place where there actually is a temple on high that korbanot are being offered by the angel Michael. And now we're at the next highest level of heaven, Ma'on. So it's 3 lines down in the middle-sized line. Ma'on shebo kitot shamalachei hasharet sha'omrot shira b'layla. So Ma'on is the place where the groups of heavenly angels sing to God at night, but they're silent in the day. Israel, because of respect to the Jewish people, in order to allow the Jewish people to give Shira in the day and to say Kaddish in the day. And the reason we don't say Kaddish at night, so that's why the angels say Kaddish. Right, in our Kaddish, we refer to how the angels sing to God and say Kadosh, Kadosh, and so on. So we do that in the day, and they do that at the night. In the morning, in the day, God will command His kindness. So the kindness presumably is that He allows the angels to be silent so that Bnei Israel can sing. Ubelayla Shiba Imi, and at night His song is with me. The song of the angels is what is being offered to God, or alternatively, the song that I offered in the day is with God at night. But anyway, this is Ma'on is where the angels say Shira at night, and we say Shira on the day. Now we have not really spelled out how we know that this happens in the Ma'on, but we are going to get back to that. But first, we're going to digress a little. Anybody who studies Torah at nighttime, God draws a strand of kindness on him in the day. Shene'emar, as the verse says, Yomam Yitzaveh Hashem Chazdo. In the day, God will command His kindness. Umatam, what's the reason? Because Umatam, Yomam Yitzaveh Hashem Chazdo. Why will God do that? Mishumu B'layla Shira Imi, because the song of God is with me at night. So the significance of learning Torah at the night particularly has to be appreciated at a time where there was no electricity and where basically at night is where everybody just sort of went to sleep. So if somebody is making the time to make sure to burn the midnight oil, burn the night oil in order to learn, that's a really going that extra mile. And also in particular, there's an idea, I think Rambam speaks about how there's nobody is up at night and there are no distractions. So it's a particularly, opportune time to be studying. Also, I think that a way that we can relate to it nowadays is, it's the time that's not pre-designated for something else. So the question always is how do you use your discretionary time, and what does that show you in terms of where your priorities are? So you wake up at 2 a.m. What do? Do you check your emails? Do you pick up the newspaper? Do you open up a chumash? So what do you do at night is very significant. So and therefore that's this drasha. The other interesting thing is that it refers to Torah as Shira. This is a point that Rav Soloveitchik also discusses a good deal. This issue about the way, the relationship of Torah and Tefillah as a way of connecting to God, and they're two, and sort of seeing it as a type of a Tefillah. Okay, so that's a little digression drasha. Some say anybody who learns Torah in this world, which is like night, God stretches upon him a strand of kindness in the world to come, which is similar to the day. God will extend His kindness in the day, and at night His song is with me. So if one's Torah is with one in the period of nighttime in this world, then God's kindness grace will be shown upon him in the world to come. Amr of Levi, opposing with Torah, now again, we are digressing from the digression. Anybody who interrupts their Torah and deals with sort of discretionary talk, not Torah talk. So obviously there's a time for discretionary talk, but not to interrupt your Torah in order to do it. So if you do that, the person is fed like burning embers of ritamim, which are some, I looked it up, it's some type of, I don't know how they translate it, but some type of a disgusting thing. Okay, Emar, what how they translate ritamim? I forget. Anyway.
The roots of the broom tree.
Broom roots, right. Shenemar, hakotfim meluach alei siach, those who, again, this is a hard verse, but it talks about eating these various poisonous or disgusting things. V'shorish risamim lachmam, the roots of the broom tree are their bread. We know in the Iku Shamayim. Anyway, back to our point, which is that in the Ma'on is where the angels sing to God at night. Now, how do you know the Ma'on is called Shamayim? Shenemar, Hishkiva mimon kadshecha min Shamayim. Look down from your heavenly abode from heaven. Okay, so now it doesn't. So that's how you know Ma'on is called the God's heavenly abode, or it's called one of the heavens. How exactly you know what's going on there? You know that that's where the angels sing. That is not clear at all that that's located in the Ma'on, but that's asserted in the Gemara. Now Machon, what happens in the Machon? Shabo, Otzos Shisheleg, Otzos Barad, that's where God keeps all of the storehouses of snow and hail, the Aliyat Tzlalim Ra'im, and the sort of warehouses of the attics of the bad rains, Aliyat Egalim V'Charada Shosufa, and the warehouses of the attics of these of Agalim, which Rashi says essentially is destructive rain. Destructive rain and like whirlwinds, bad winds, v'sara, u'mi'ara shel kitur, and the cave where there's this like smoke. But also say an H, and the doors of these are fire. So anyway, all these bad meteorological events, they all come pouring down from this place, this heaven. Now, how do you know that there's a warehouse that has all this bad stuff? Because the verse says God should open for you his good warehouse, which obviously implies that there's also a bad warehouse. So this is where the bad warehouse is. Now, how do we know this is in the Machon? I have no idea, but that's being asserted. Now, Hani Berakia Isnu, so now the Gemara asks, those are in the heavens? Hani Ba'arim Isnu, they're in the earth. To see, as the verse says, praise God from the land. See monsters in all the depths. Eshu varad, shelet vikitor, fire and hail, snow and pillars of smoke. Ruach se'ara, whirlwinds. Osei dvaro. So these are all coming from the land. It says mina aretz, so not from the heavens. So Amrav Yudam Rav, David bikesh aleim rachamim v'havidan la'aretz. David asked for compassion from God and brought these down from heaven to earth. He said to him, Ribbono Shalom, Master of the universe, Lo echofetz rasha ata, you are not a God who desires evil. Lo yigur chara, evil will not dwell with you. Tzadika ata Hashem, you God are righteous, so lo yigur b'gur chara, so evil things cannot dwell in your inhabitants, so that should not be up in heaven, it should be down here. Now, of course, that seems like a concern for God. God, all this bad stuff shouldn't be up there with you. Okay, how does that help us down here? And maybe David's rachamim is rachamim for God, not rachamim for people. But maybe the sense is that if it's coming from earth and it's sort of a natural meteorological event, it is less weighty, than if it's coming from God. It maybe will be less destructive. Maybe minimally it's less indicative of God's displeasure. So David brings those things down here to the earth. 1 minute, uminola the ikri. Shamayim, and how do you know that these are called the heavens? Because the verse says, you will hear the heavens, the place established for your dwelling. So that's how you know the word Machon is associated with Shamayim. How do you know all these things are in the Machon? That again is just being asserted, that is not being proved from a verse. Yes?
It sounds like David HaMelech changed the natural order of
prayer. Yes, right. So there's other Gemaras like that as well.
Yeah,
okay.
I know.
All right, what do you want me to say? Moving on. Now, okay. Where are we? Aravot. Which is like the heavenly, the highest of heavens. God is Rochev Aravot. Like he He rides in his chariot up in the Arevot. So this is, as we're going to see, is like the highest of heavens. So let's take a look. Okay. Okay. We know that we just did that. Okay. Shabo tzedek mishpat v'tzedakah. That's where justice and law and righteousness and ginzei chayim v'ginzei shalom, warehouses of life, warehouses of peace, v'ginzei bracha, the warehouses of blessing, nishmatan shel tzadikim, the souls of the righteous, v'ruach v'ruchot neshamot, and the winds and the souls she'azid lihibarot, that will be created in the future. So presumably the spirit of the righteous that have already lived, and future souls that will be created. So presumably they're set as yet unsullied. The tal she'atira kodesh baruch hu lachayus b'metim, and the dew that God will bring down to the heaven, to the earth, in order to resuscitate the dead in the time of Tchias HaMetim. All those things are present there. So these are all the really very good stuff, right? And all the stuff that's getting much closer to the divine. Righteousness and justice are the establishment of your throne. So again, that's the word mechon, but here we're dealing with aravot. So again, it's more being asserted that this is what's there. Might see that these are associated with heaven, but not necessarily with aravot. That's just being asserted. Okay. I think that is. God clothed himself with righteousness like a cloak of armor. So the other thing, by the way, although it does not have the word here of aravot, these are things that are very close to God, right? It's a kisei, his throne, it's God's clothing. The warehouses of life, as it says, ki imcha, with you, makor chayim is the source of life. God called him peace, so we're also so close to God, presumably. All these things are very much right there together with God. To lift up blessing from the presence of God, so it's me'es Hashem, it's right there with God. And here you see it's about those who have died, because the bracha given to David when he was about to die, right, which is put on gravestones a lot, but the soul of my master shall be bound up with the bound of life, es Hashem Elokecha, with Hashem your God. So right there with God. The future souls that will be created. The spirit will be wrapped and come from in front of me. And souls I have made. So again, all of these are immediately in the presence of God. To tell the dew that God will use to resuscitate the dead. The rain of kindness you will cause to like a flutter over them, and they are your inheritance, and they are your and they have become weary. Atah konanta, you have established it. Sham ofanim, now there are the ofanim, which are some celestial angels, with seraphim and the fire angels, with chayos hakodesh and the heavenly beasts, heavenly angels, all these different categories of angels. The kisei hakavod and the divine throne. So this is like the highest heaven. Melech el chai ram v'nisa shochein alehem, and God, the King, the living and exalted King, is there dwelling above them. So God, which is also a deeply disturbing theological idea, because it sounds like God is in the same heaven with all these things, right? So alehem, over them. So maybe he's a little bit higher. We'll see in a minute. Okay, Shneimar, as the verse says, Solu the Rochev, praise for the Rochev, for the one who rides ba'aravot, in the aravot. Bekat Shemo, in Ka is his name. So God is Rochev aravot, riding like in the aravot. So he's right there.
That's just coming with Sparsha.
Right. And where do you know that aravot is called heaven? Asi rechiva rechiva. We make a link from the word of to ride, like Shantivacha Solu Rochev aravot Bekat Shemo. But see, also when it says Rochev Shemayim be'ezrecha, that's this week's parsha. God rides in the heavens to your assistance. Okay, now if God is right there, with all these things. So we'll have a little bit of God being separate. And darkness and the cloud and the deep cloud surround God. So he places darkness in his hiding place. Surrounding him is his shelter, the darkness of water, the thickness of the clouds. 1 minute says Gemara. Is there darkness in the presence of God? I mean, you shouldn't need darkness to separate God from everything else, but that's associating darkness with God. So the verse says, Hu gali amikta, God reveals that which is hidden, umistartra yada, and he knows what it's hidden, ma b'chashocha, he knows what's in the darkness, v'nahora imei shari, and light is with God, so with God is light. So lokash, it's not difficult. Habivate gavai, habivate barai, top of Yugim Amaraf, we had this before. One is in the, what do you call it, the inner house, the inner room is where God is light. But the outer room is darkness. So presumably, even though all these things are taking place in the Arivot, God himself is not directly there. God is in some inner room. The actual essence of God is not directly in the present, and rather the darkness that surrounds God is in the more exposed outer room in this presence, whatever any of that means. What is also interesting, by the way, I should say, is that all of the bad stuff, bracketing David HaMelech's prayer, but before that, all of the bad stuff is the immediate heaven directly below God, right? Like you had like a lot of good stuff, like the angels singing songs and all this type of stuff. But then right before you hit the top heaven, which is with all the bad, with all the stuff of the souls of the righteous and righteousness and truth and all these things, right? You got all the like bad meteorological events, which is a way I think of dealing with this whole issue, right? About where does evil come from? Does evil come from God? But sort of everything is from God, but the distancing of evil from God. So we sort of put it really up there. I mean, evil's right there up in the heavens. It's just like one heaven below. And then we have David who solves the problem more and brings it all down to the earth. So it makes it less from God. Yes.
In the temple, you have all the bloodshed of the Azara.
Yeah.
And then you have the Hagigah,
right,
which is kept lit the entire time.
Right.
But this doesn't work because the Kachim is always
dark
except when the point to go.
Right, but that's the interesting thing about that is inner and outer.
Yeah,
okay.
I think this is
So maybe that's the idea. Okay, right.
Some of these,
right, things dealing with those images, right. So it is interesting, right? Trying to deal with, of course, keeping God separate, but also these idea of these things in God's presence. So this issue about the cloud and the inner and outer house, and also, like I said, trying to deal with the issue of evil, and evil sort of being in a lower heaven, but still from God, and then the Gemara not being so happy with that, so bringing evil even further away from God. Okay. Now, Amar Ravacha, top of Yudgim Amar Aleph, so he's bothered with this idea of God being in the same heaven as these celestial beings. So he says there's another rakia above the heads of the heavenly angels, the heavenly chayot, and an image above the heads of the angels, rakia, and it was a rakia, a heaven, like the awesome frost. So therefore, in this highest heaven, that's where God is. Okay, God isn't with all these angels. Until you get to this highest heaven, you can talk, like we've been talking, and discuss what's in each heaven. From that point on, you can't talk. So you cannot discuss God's self, and the highest heaven. And this is what it's written in the book of Ben Sira. It's interesting quoting Ben Sira here as the evidence. Often we understand that the Sfarim Chitzonim is what we're not supposed to talk about. Here we're using the Sfarim Chitzonim to tell us what are the limits of permitted knowledge. But Ben Sira always had a special place for Chazal. Anyway, with that is hidden from you, you should not explore. That which is covered for you, you should not investigate. Sort of that's the essence of our Mishnah. What have you given permission? You can understand. You don't have any business dealing with things that are hidden. So that's a nice distillation of our Mishnah of limiting the exploration of knowledge. But also, I should say, it's interesting, this idea of the final heaven you can't discuss. It's the Kabbalistic way of dealing with the sort of theological challenge of Rambam. Rambam basically, right, he denies any literal, any anthropomorphisms, but he goes further. It's not just about God's body. He denies anthropopathism as well, any discussion of God's emotions. Any positive language used to describe God, Rambam says, is ultimately a perversion, because it's using a human experience to attribute it to God, and ultimately it is a diminishing of God. It's fundamentally false. So Rambam says the only thing you can say about God is that you can't say anything about it. So Kabbalah, which is obviously has very vivid imagery of God and a very dynamic and live and positive attributes assigning to God. How do they deal with it? So they refer to an Ein Sof, Aleph Samech, like the infinite, which we don't say anything about. And then when we start to describe God, we're describing all of the things that are a little bit lower than the Ein Sof, some type of an emanation of the Ein Sof, and the Sfirot and so on, and even the highest Sfirot, those aren't yet the Ein Sof. That's not the essence of God, the infinite essence. So in a way, that's what you're getting in this Gemara. You have the highest Rakia, which we can't talk about. Okay, you're not allowed to talk about it. If you wanted to say more philosophically like the Rambam, any discussion would be fundamentally false. But you have the lower Rakiyas, that stuff we can already talk about. Okay, yes, I think that really is paralleled in some of the Kabbalah, in the way the Kabbalah deals with these issues. Okay. Time we turn to Brisa. I'm Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Matshuva hishvasu basko losa Russia. So this is a little bit of a digression, but you'll see not much because it deals with the heavens and the height of the heavens and how distant God is from humanity. What answer did a Basko respond to that wicked person, meaning Nebuchadnezzar, B'shar Amar, when he said, Elel b'amasei av, I will rise up on a high cloud, edamel le'elyon, I will be like the Most High. So here's Nebuchadnezzar coming to conquer the world and destroy the Beit HaMikdash, and he's sort of saying, at least Yeshayahu imagines him saying, that he is going to now make war against God. So what was the response to that? So Yatzda Basko the Amra, so a heavenly voice came out and said, Lo, Russia ben Russia, wicked person, the son of a wicked person, ben Minoshel Nimrod Russia, the grandson of the Nimrod of Russia. Now Tosfos says not literally the biological grandson, but the spiritual grandson of Nimrod. Nimrod, from the word mered, it's not explicit in the verse, but Chazal understand Nimrod to be a very wicked person and trying to get humanity to rebel against God, right? Also maybe associated with the Migdal Bavel, right? And to go up, again, not clear in the Psukim what they did wrong, but certainly in a lot of Midrashic imagination, it was going to rise up to heaven and wage war against God. So you are that spiritual grandson. Come on, and now look how absurd this claim is. How long can a person live? Shivim Shana, 70 years. Right? A person's life is 70 years, at most 80 years. Right? Hello? Now let's see how long it will take you to get up to God. From the ground until the first heaven, is 500 years it'll take you to get there. The Ovi of Shavakia, then you have to get through the thickness of the first heaven. Right? The thickness of the first heaven is 500 years. And also now to get from one heaven to the next, the gap between each heaven is 500 years, and each heaven itself is 500 years thick as well. Okay, so if there are 7 heavens, right, so you got to basically takes you 7,000 years, right, to get through the top of the 7th heaven. Okay, and now you're at the top of the 7th heaven. That took you 7,000 years. Now, in the 7th heaven, above them is Chayot HaKodesh, the heavenly angels, the heavenly beasts. Raglei Chayot, Keneged Kulam. So Raglei Chayot. So now you're going to have to get past the heavenly beasts to get to God. So first of all, you have to get through the legs of the feet of the heavenly beasts. Keneged Kulam. Karsulei Chayot, Keneged Kulam. Now, the length of the feet of the heavenly beasts is equal to all of the previous heavens. So 7,000 years just to get beyond the feet of the heavenly beasts. Then the legs of the heavenly beasts, that's equal to everything before. I don't know if that's now 7,000 or 14,000, but you're getting the idea. Shokei hachayos, so now I'm sorry, that's the ankles. The ankles are another 7,000 or 14,000 years. Shogei chayos, the calves, kineged kulan, are equal to all of everything that preceded. Rechuvei chayot, kineged kulan, the knees are equal to everything that preceded. Yarchei chayot, the thighs, kineged kulan, are equal to the length of everything that preceded. Gufei chayot, now the actual you have to transverse the body of the beasts. Keneged kulam, that's another 7,000 years. Savarei chayot, now you have to get on top of their neck, higher than their necks. Keneged kulam, that's another 7,000 years. Rashei chayot, I have to get over their heads. Keneged kulam, another 7,000 years. Or again, maybe it's even more. Maybe everything is equal to everything that preceded. Oh, that's what the article is saying?
No,
It's possible. Okay. Keep on being cumulative. All right. We're in a few million years probably by now. Anyway, now you're not enough to be over the head of the priest. Karnei chayot. Get over their horns. Kineg kulam, equal to everything that preceded. Lamala, man, you're still not up to God. Because on top of the heavenly beasts is kisei kavod, is the divine throne. Ragle kisei. Now you have to get through the legs of the chair. So that's kineged agavod kineged kulam. Kisei avod kineged kulam. Now you have to get above the chair itself. So if that's equal to the length. And then finally, Melech Elam Chai V'Kayam Ravanisa Shochein Olam. Then finally you get to God. Okay? So that's how long it's going to take you to get to God. It's going to take you, hundreds of thousands of years to get all the way up the heavens and to God. So, Martin, you said, I will go up on a high cloud, I'll be like the Most High. No, you will go down to the lowest depths. Oh, you have to say bore to the very bottom of the pit. Okay, so nice image about not just listing what's in the heavens, but how supremely above our reality God is. Right, so describing it obviously in very physical types of terms, but to communicate the idea of the degree that which God completely transcends our reality. Just 1 second, I wanted to point to an interesting Tosfos, because Tosfos says the following. Raglei Chayot Keneged Kulam, Tosa says, Yesh Megihim B'Kedushasa Sheyisat HaKalir. There's a Kaddish of a Kedusha of the Kalir. Kalir was one of the earliest Paitan. And it says V'Chayot, right? Because the Kaddish speaks about all the heavenly angels, right, praising God. V'Chayot Yishoreru. Particularly, we have this on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim. We have an elaborated one. Chayot, the Chayot will give, will sing V'Arelim Yiranenu, etc. So in one of his Kedushas, it had the Chayot Asher Hina Merubaot L'Kisei, the Chayot that are surrounding God's chariot. Kaf Regel Chamesh Me'ot, the foot of one of the Chayot is 500, the Chamesh Esrei, 515. Now it's not 515, right? We were saying that it's like everything that preceded, or at least it's like 500 years. What's 500? Where's this 15 coming from? So some switch the gears, said Tosfos. Umochikim havav, they remove the vav. Omrim kikein olo lefi cheshbon shebakan leminyan zayin rakim v'chet avirim hu tetvav pamim tafket. It's not 515. It's 500 times 15, because you had the 7 heavens, you had the airspace between them, which is 7 airspace, because the earth to the first heaven, and then maybe presumably he said 8 airspaces, so maybe from the top of the 7th heaven to where the Chayot are is another airspace. Anyway, it's 500 times 15. Okay, so that's how they switch the gears. But then if you skip a little in Tosfos, he says like this. He says like this. He says. Okay, well, I'll treat it. Miu, says Tosfos, they unnecessarily amended the text. When he wrote this piyut, he didn't base it on the Bavli that has the things to be like 500, 500 times 15 or 500 times 14 or whatever it is. He did it based on the Yerushalmi. The Harawa and the Gemara and Brachos, and the Yerushalmi says that they are 515 amot. Okay, now why did he base himself on a Yerushalmi, not on a Bavli? So if you skip down a little, it says line starts with Shebakama Mikomot in a number of places. There are a number of places that the Kalir did not follow the Bavli, to inform his piyuts, but followed the Yerushalmi. Shua Yatana, okay, and now he's going to make another sort of very extreme claim that the Kalir was a Tana, lived in before in the 2nd century, which is obviously not true. Etc., etc. So besides this extreme claim that he was a Tana, the fact that he follows the Yerushalmi is significant, because the practice of piyut is one that was very popular in Eretz Yisrael and then in Italy and in Ashkenaz, and that was that culture, because the Ashkenazic culture came from Eretz Yisrael and Italy, and it was not not very common in Bavel and in Sfarad. So the fact that very often you find, that's why some Ashkenazi minhagim are more harken back to the Yerushalmi than the Bavli, and certainly the Ashkenazi Paitanim, right, are coming from the more Eretz Yisrael tradition, and therefore following the Yerushalmi and not the Bavli. The idea that he was a Tana is obviously historically not true, but it reflects, again, the reverence to which they held the Kalir and his piyutim, that they actually believed him to, some actually believed him to be a Tana. Yes?
If he was really a Tana, he could not have followed the Risami or the Bavli. I don't know.
Well, that's the point. Then that's just like an alternative explanation. Some add in the Yeshomrim, Okay. So back to the Gemara. So that was very interesting about the height of the heavens. Now that we're done explicating Maaseh Bereshis, which we're not supposed to talk about, although maybe what we did was the permissible part, what's the other part we're not supposed to talk about, we get to discussing the Merkava, the divine Shechuyot. So that you're not supposed to discuss even with one person unless the person already pretty much knows what you're talking about. Tani Rabbi Chia taught, even though you cannot teach to a person unless they can sort of figure out by themselves, presumably even a person that's not at the level that you can teach them, you can still give them the chapter headings. You can give them the broad strokes. Let them sort of figure out the rest. I'm Rabbi Zera. No. You can only give even the chapter headings. You can only give to like the head of a bastin, so somebody only very high level. And also, this is a fascinating, somebody whose heart is worried inside of him. What does that mean? Somebody who is worried is allowed to learn this stuff. So some say it's a double criteria, which makes sense. But how would it be that that's sufficient all by itself? Who cares if somebody's heart worries? Why does that allow you to teach him Maaseh Merkava? So it could mean that because the person is so afraid and has the right Yiras Shamayim that they won't misuse the information. That's quite possibly what it means. It could also mean, this gets to the interesting question about the danger of theological study. It could lead people astray. But people who are already exploring and having questions, for them, if they don't engage in theological study, they might reject it all anyway because they have all these problems and questions. So it might mean Libo Doeg Bikirbo is somebody that is already very much sort of, theologically deeply troubled and needs to be able to have these discussions, and for that person, it's actually more helpful to have these than it is dangerous, right? That gets into like the old issues, right? Like for example, Rambam, writes in the Mishnah Torah, he writes, like he talks about, well, how could there be divine foreknowledge and free will? And he gives an answer. And the Ravid says, your answer wasn't any good, and you're raising this question without giving a good answer, so you're just making everybody, everybody, you're disturbing them, their faith. Better you should have just been quiet about it. Right? So that's the whole question. Do you discuss issues of faith, and that disturbs people who actually, are like feel good about their emunah, or do you not discuss them, and then people that are asking questions and and are troubled don't have any answers? So it could be that that's part of what this Mishaliba Doeg Bikirbo means here. Somebody who's already troubled, for that person, it's important to have those discussions, at least the chapter headings. How do they translate it there in the article and the Steinsaltz? What? No, not chapter headings. Doeg Bikirbo. Is it because they'll have Yirat Shamayim, or is it? What does that mean? Yeah.
There's a note that says he's not inclined to be frivolous.
Oh, so he has right Yirat Shamayim. Okay, that's the way they explained it, not my way. Any other thing there in Steinsaltz?
Anyone whose heart inside it is concerned.
And does he give any explanation with that?
Concerned about his sins and desires to achieve full repentance.
Okay, fine. So they're explaining it more like he will have the right Yiras Shamayim. All right, moving on. Okay. So now the Gemara says like this. You can only give over the hidden the hidden parts of the Torah. Now that's not necessarily Maaseh Bereshit. If you look at Rashi, he says Sitrei Torah is where's Rashi? Kigon Maaseh Merkava, like we just okay. So that is not it is Maaseh. I mean, so not Maaseh Bereshit, I meant Maaseh Merkava, which is what we're discussing. So number one, it is Maaseh Merkava, but Rashi adds other things as well. The Sefer Yitzirah, which is believed to have been written by Adam HaRishon, the book of creation. Okay, you can make a golem if you know the Sefer Yitzirah. Maaseh Bereshis, and also Maaseh Bereshis. Okay, so now we have all this stuff as included in Sitrei Torah, no longer just Maaseh Merkava. So Ein Moshe in Sitrei Torah Ela Mi Sheish Bo Chamisha Dvarim has to have 5 qualities. Sar Chamishim. So panim v'yo'et v'chacham charashim v'navon lachash. So we're going to unpack that later, but obviously some of these things are clear. I mean, not what Neso Panim, lifted up faith, isn't so clear, but Yoetz v'chacham v'charashim, like somebody who's, wise, has counsel, and is wise to hidden things, and, understands those that are whispered, understands hidden things. So somebody who has deep understanding, okay, but we're going to unpack that later. By the way, forget Sitri Torah. You can't even give straight Torah over to the non-Jews, right? This appears in different forms elsewhere. Some places the Gemara says that it's that a non-Jew who learns Torah is chayav misa. It says, "Lo asachein l'chol goy." God did not do this for any other nation. And mishpatim bal yidaum. He did not inform them of God's laws. So you are not supposed to inform them of God's laws. God Dafka wanted it to be for Yisrael. Now back to Maaseh Merkava. Rabbi Yochanan said to Rabbi Elazar, "Tag Mercha b'Maaseh Merkava. Come, let me teach you Maaseh Merkava." That's a nice invitation to get from a Rebbe. So Amar Lei, so he said to him, "Lo kashai, I'm not old enough. I'm not ready." So that's the idea of having to be 40. That came later, but the idea of having to be the right age before you study mystical things. So I'm not old enough. Kikosh, when he had finally gotten old, nach nafsid Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan had already passed away. So it's too late for him to learn the Maaseh Merkava. So Amalei Rav Asi, so then instead of Rabbi Yochanan, now Rav Asi said to him, Tavag Marcha Maaseh Merkava, let me teach you Maaseh Merkava. So now he's old enough, Rabbi Elazar, he can learn it. So what did he say back? Amalei said back to Rav Asi, Izakai Gemirtim Rabbi Yochanan Ravcha. Had I merited, I would have learned it from Rabbi Yochanan, your Rebbe. So since I didn't merit to learn it from Rabbi Yochanan, I'm not going to learn it from you. One wonders if he really just didn't want to learn Maaseh Merkava. Okay, so Rav Yosef, having Gamir Maaseh Merkava, Rav Yosef knew the Maaseh Merkava, learned the Maaseh Merkava. Sabi de Pumbedisa, now the elders of Pumbedisa, have a ton of Maaseh Bereshis. They had learned the Maaseh Bereshis. By the way, it's interesting the different verb use. Gamir is used more for Gemara, right, which means sort of like an analyze. Tani is learned for Mishnah, which means more to just like, know the information, be a repository for the information. So presumably indicating a deeper level of understanding that is needed from Maaseh Merkava. So he knew the Maaseh Merkava, but the elders of Pumbedisa knew the teachings, and maybe Rashi sort of indicates that they might be brightot, so they knew the teachings of Maaseh Bereshit. Okay, so they each had knowledge the other one did not have. Amruleh, so they said to him, Ligmar lan mar Maaseh Merkava, teach us the Maaseh Merkava. Interesting. Did they come to him as a group? You're only supposed to teach it individually. Anyway, he said to them, Agmur and Li Maaseh Bereshis. You guys first teach me your Maaseh Bereshis, what you know about Maaseh Bereshis. Basa to Agmarun. So after that, so fine, they taught him Maaseh Bereshis. I can probably see where this is going. After they taught him Maaseh Bereshis, Amruleh, they said to him, Ligmar and Mar b'Maaseh Merkava. So now you teach us Maaseh Merkava. Amruleh, Lahu, he said to them, Tanina, we taught in the Brisa, Tanina behu. Dvash v'chalav tachas l'shonecha, honey and milk under your tongue. Dvar ma'metuki midvash v'chalav, things that are sweeter than honey and milk. Yei tachas l'shoncha, you have to keep them under your tongue. So he basically said, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to share Maaseh Merkava. Thank you for teaching me Maaseh Bereshis, but I can't share with you Maaseh Merkava. My knowledge is too secret. Rabbi Avo quoted the following verse: "Kivashim lilvushacha, I think is the verse. That sheep, shall be for your clothes, like the wool of the sheep. But the reading we have is dvarim shem ki shono shalom, things that are the hidden things of the world. Yei tachas levusha, keep them under your garments, close to your vest, as we would say, right? What do we say? Under your vest? What's the phrase? Close to your vest? Under your clothes? No, I know, but what's the expression? Close to your vest. Okay. All right. Amruleh. Okay. So he didn't want to teach them. So they said to him, Tanin and says, okay, but listen, you should know, it's not like we're not in this discourse. We actually have already learned a good amount of Maaseh Merkava. We've learned about the Bahu until the verse, Vayomer Elai ben Adam, which is in Yecheskel Bet. The Maaseh Merkava is the vision in Yecheskel Aleph. So they said to him, it's not like we're neophytes here. We've learned all the way up to Yecheskel Bet. So Amar Lehu, he said to them, Hein Maaseh Merkava, then you already know Maaseh Merkava. So you don't need me. After Yecheskel Bet, it's no longer Maaseh Merkava. Okay, so basically he said, so fine, no problem, then I'm still not going to teach you, but you basically have it already. Okay, so Meisvei, now I'll ask you on this, that only up till Yecheskel Bet, Maaseh Merkava goes all the way till Yecheskel Bet. Ad Heichan Maaseh Merkava, until where's Maaseh Merkava? Rebbe Omer ad Va'era Basra, until the second time it says Va'era. So, meaning, meaning, now the way Rashi understands this Gemara, it means not until where is it, but from where does it start? So if you take a look, right, in Yechezkel, right, so all of his vision, right, Yechezkel starts that he was here in the exile and he saw this vision. Vinei ruach sa'ara ba'amin atzafon, anan kaved, deishim sakachas v'noga lasaviv, umitocha, from in it, ke'ena chashma mitocha eish, like the chashma from within the fire. Now that whole thing, right, umitocha demus sabar chayot, the four heavenly beasts, and then he describes them with their wings, etc., etc. Okay, and then they open up, right, and he says chayos ratzo vashov, all of this thing about their looking, and then vayomer lai ben adam, that was all the way parak. So now Rabbi here says, right, what's the first answer? Ad va'era, until it says va'era, which is the which is right before it opens up, with Va'era Vinei Ruach Sa'ara, right before it opens up with the vision of what he saw. So the way Rashi explains it, it means until Va'era is okay. Starting from Va'era onwards, that's where the actual Maaseh Merkava begins that you're not allowed to talk about. Okay? So until the word HaChashmal, okay, what's starting to discuss the Chashmal, that's the dangerous stuff. So Ad Va'era Migamrinan. So until the era you can teach. Mikan ve'elach masrinan rashi prakim, and from that place on you can only give the chapter headings. Okay, so well, we're going to discuss what's chashmal. I can't tell you. I can only give you the chapter heading. Okay, so okay, 1 minute. Okay, so basically, so the Gemara's, so the Gemara said, like, why did they make it sound like everything until that point, until the second parak, was Maaseh Merkava, if you were dividing within the first parak? So the Gemara is saying, yes, we're dividing within the first parak, but the Maaseh Merkava, the part that you're not allowed to explicate, that starts, the few psukim in the beginning you are allowed to explicate, but the fundamental Maaseh Merkava that you're not allowed to explicate, that starts from this verse about the Chashmal. Okay, so Ad Va'era Migamrinan, that you can't teach. Mikan Ve'elach Masrinan Rashi Prakim, only the chapter headings. Igad Amri, others say, Ad Va'era Masrinan Rashi Prakim, no, until the word Va'era, you can give chapter headings. Mikan Ve'elach, and after the Va'era, until when you start talking about the Chashmal, then it's even more restrictive. Only if somebody is wise and can understand on their own can you explicate. Low, but if they're not at that level, then you can't even give chapter headings, starting by the discussion of the Chashmal. So the first parak is divided. The question is, what level is it divided? Is it everybody more or less can learn until the Chashmal, and from that point on, only chapter headings, or only chapter headings until the Chashmal, and from that point on, only somebody who is a Chacham Mevid Midato? Now the Gemara says, Umidar Shirim B'Chashmal. Now the Gemara says, 1 minute. So somebody is allowed to learn about the Chashmal, either in chapter headings or Chacham Mevin Midato. So is anybody allowed to be taught that? There was that infant, or child, not an infant, the Darsh B'Chashmal, that he was explicating the meaning of this Chashmal, the Nafik Nura V'Achalte, and fire came out of heaven or something and consumed him. So you see, that's why you're not supposed to play with electricity, okay, because you'll get burned. So the Gemara says, but clearly Chashmal is a type of fiery power. Okay, and this is what happened. He dabbled in it with it not being ready. So the Gemara says, no. Shani Yenuka Delav Mati Zimne. No. That was a child. He wasn't yet the right age, like we said before. But if you are of the right age and you're able to understand it, then if you're Chacham Mevin Midato and you're of the right age, then you are allowed to learn even the Chashmal. Amar Rav Yehuda, Bram Zechor So Ish Latov. Now, because we're talking about Yechezkel, we're going to sort of talk about some things about the book of Yechezkel. That man should be remembered for good. V'Chanani ben Chizkiah Shemo. His name was Chanani ben Chizkiah. Yamal Yehuda Nigno Sefer Yechezkel. Were it not for him, the book of Yechezkel would have been hidden. It was too dangerous. Now, there's two things that are dangerous about it. One is this heavenly vision, and the other is the fact that the later chapters, particularly where it talks about Mikdash-related issues, contradict Psukim in the Torah in terms of the laws of the Mikdash and of the Kohanim. So that's what we're going to discuss, both of those. Shahayu dvar sosim divrei Torah. Its words contradicted the Torah. Ma'asa helulo gimel meos garbe shemen. So he brought up 300 like flasks of oil. The Yoshev ba'aliyah, and he was in his attic, and he sort of worked on it night and day. V'darshu, and they explicated, and they finally figured out how to reconcile it so the laws in Yechezkel don't contradict. So he basically said, it's too powerful of a book to put in hiding, and therefore we're going to keep it in the canon, and we're going to figure out a way to reconcile the problems, and we're going to have to work harder, but we're going to do it. Tanu Rabbanan, a certain child was reading in his master's house in the book of Yechezkel, and this child was brilliant, and he understood the secrets of the Chashmal, so here's Mevin Mida'ato, okay, but Yatsa Eish Michashmal v'Sarafto, and a fire came out of this heavenly Chashmal and burnt him up. And as a result of that, they wanted to hide the book of Yechezkel. So Amar Lehem Chanani ben Chizkiah, so the same Chanani ben Chizkiah, he had a thing for the book of Yechezkel, said to them, if this one is wise and he can understand it at a young age, and therefore it's dangerous, other people won't understand it. So meaning you don't have to hide it, because normally either you don't understand it, or if you understand it, you're old enough to handle it. So it's rare that you get somebody this young who was able to understand it, but was so young that it was dangerous in this person's hands. So we don't have to hide this knowledge just because some rare cases it'll be misused. Most of the time, either people won't understand it, or they'll understand it, but they'll be at the level where they're supposed to be learning it. Okay, so again, you have this idea of chacham mevid midato, but this other idea that you have to be of the right age. Now, my chashmal. Now we get to ask what the chashmal is, which we're not supposed to be discussing. This is Maaser Merkava. Okay, so what's the chashmal? So, Amar Rav Yehuda. So said Rav Yehuda, top of Yud Gimel Amud Bet, Chayot Eish Mimalot. So it's a little Roshei Tevot, Chashmal, fiery beasts that speak to one another. Okay, and the fire comes out of their speech, Rashi says. The Masni Satan, in the Bright we taught, Itim Chashot, Itim Mimalot. Sometimes these fiery beasts are silent, sometimes they speak. When the speech is coming from God, chashot, the beasts are silent. When speech is not coming from God, mimalot, then they speak. And that sort of energy, you understand why in modern Hebrew chashmal becomes electricity, because it's like this live fire. It's like electric, right? It moves between the beasts, right? And it's related to fire. Okay. The chayot ratzovasho, the beasts were running back and forth. Marei habazak, like the look of lightning. Okay, my ratzovasho. What does it mean running back and forth? I'm Rav Yehuda k'ora yotze mipiakiv shan, like fire that comes out of the furnace, right? Like it flickers and it goes back and forth and it moves in and out. My kamarei habazak. What does it mean like the vision of lightning? So Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina k'ora yotze mibein hacharasim, like the fire that comes out of the pottery. Rashi describes that, and then they have like these things that they smelt gold. They have like a pottery floor on top of the fire with holes in the pottery, that the fire comes out of. So it's like the flashing in and out of those holes. And I looked, and a whirlwind was coming from the north. This is also from Yechezkel, a large cloud and a fire that was that was sparking, that was v'nogalo saviv, and a glow of it surrounding it. And in its midst, like the chashmal from the midst of the fire. So now, where did it go? Where Rashi's gear says, what was it doing in the tzafon? Because tzafon is usually bavel, mitzafon tifatach hara'ah. So what was this wind that was carrying all of this heavenly chariot and the fiery chariot, or whatever it was, these fiery angels? What was it doing in the north, in Bavel? So Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav Shahalach Lichvoshes Kolam Kulot Tachas Nebuchadnezzar HaRasha, that it went to conquer the world in the presence of Nebuchadnezzar, to give Nebuchadnezzar the power to conquer the world. So why were the angels helping out Nebuchadnezzar, the divine chariot? So why? The Kolkach Lama, why? Shelo Yomu Mos Haolam, so the nations should not say Biad Umashfalam Masar Kadosh Baruch Hu Panav, that the Israelites, the people, the Bnei Israel, were conquered by a lowly nation. No, we're so important that we're only going to be conquered by the most important nations, by the world's conquerors. What led me to now that I have to be an attendant, I have to be an aid to the idol worshippers? I had to go with my heavenly chariot to help conquer the world in the presence of Nebuchadnezzar. So what? Avanosayim Shel Yisrael, was their sins. Hein Garmuli. Okay. Back to now the vision, the heavenly fiery chariot of God. Va'era hachayot, and I saw the beasts. V'nei ofan echad ba'aretz, one ofan, or one wheel was on the ground. Eitzel hachayot, by the beasts, right? So if you imagine like a chariot, right? God is, again, the image you just remember, right? Remember, God is rochev ba'aravot, riding in the aravot. You are rochev, a chariot. So the image here is, right? I mean, I think you see that in some of the myths of the Greek gods, right? Like, aren't they like riding in chariots drawn by horses or whatever, right? So God is being drawn riding in this chariot. So the ophan is the wheel of the chariot, but mostly it's the vision of these fiery beasts that are God's chariot. Okay, so one ophan is on the ground. Eitzel hachayot. Amar Rabbi Linzer, Malach echad shu omed ba'aretz. This Ophan is really the name of an angel, and this angel stands on the ground. Rosho magia eitzel hachayot, and he's so huge. Remember how far it took to get to the heavenly angels, right? Hundreds of thousands of years or whatever. This angel stands on the ground, and his head gets all the way to the chayot, to the heavenly beast. The masni satan, and a bright to be taught, Sandalphon Shemo. His name is Sandalphon, this angel. Hagavo michavero mahali chamesh meot shana. So he is higher, ugavo, whatever, than the other angels, 500 years taller than all of them. And he stands behind God's chariot. The koshik tarim lekono, and he puts crowns on his creator. So, right, like, if you have the image, right, you've got, like, especially you think about like the Roman image, like the person, like the Caesar in the chariot, and the person behind the Caesar putting the crown on, Caesar's head. So it's putting the crown on God's head. So the Gemara says, Aini, what? Is that true? That somebody would be there, like, again, this thing of with God, putting the crown on God's head? The verse says, Baruch Kavod Hashem mim komo. Blessed is the honor of God from God's place. God's place is distinct from every other place. In his place, the angels can praise God. God is placed in his place. We don't see God. We're not in God's place. Wherever God is, he's praised. But they're not in God's place. In his place, no one knows. They don't know him. They know him in a different place. So here's what happens. You're right. He doesn't directly put the crown on God's head. The Amar Shem Ataga, he says God's name on the crown, V'azov Yasi Beresha. And then the crown goes and rises up to the highest heaven and sits on God's head. So he doesn't directly put the crown on God's head. And goes on his, okay. Amar Rava, says Rava, anything that Yechezkel saw Yeshaya saw, because the beginning of Yeshayahu also starts with a vision, right? And the angels say, Kadosh, 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 right? That's which he say in the Kedusha, right? So that Yeshaya saw also a vision of the divine chariot. But Yeshaya's vision is not all of this graphic description. So he says, you know what? It wasn't that Yechezkel had a different vision than Yeshayahu. They saw the same thing. But Lema Yechezkel Doma, what can Yechezkel be compared to? Leben Kfar, he's a villager. Sheras HaMelech, he got to see the king. Oh my God, a villager sees the king? He's not going to stop talking about it. He's going to tell you what the crown looked like, and what the robe looked like, and what the castle looked like, and what the courtyard looked like. Everything is like, he's starry-eyed. So therefore, all of the graphic description you get in Yechezkel. Okay, V'lema Yeshaya Doma, what's Yeshaya like? Leben Krach Sheras HaMelech. Oh, he's the person in the capital who sees the king. Big deal. Yeah, I was at the White House for their Hanukkah party. Big deal. I've been there a dozen times. Nothing to say. Okay, so that's why Yeshayahu does not go into the description. Now, why are they different in this way? So one way you could describe it, what I think the pshat is that Yeshayahu was closer to God. Yeshayahu had more of these types of visions, and therefore did not need to go into so much detail. For Yechezkel, it was a very rare thing. Rashi and Tosfos don't say that. Rashi takes it very literally. Yechezkel was the son of commoners, whereas Yeshayahu was the son of the aristocracy, and therefore he was related to the king, and therefore they maybe just in general in their life Yeshayahu was more refined, was more used to seeing royal things on earth, so therefore did not have to feel he did need to describe it so much in heaven. That's what he says. Tosfos makes another point, which is Yechezkel saw it in Chutz La'aretz. Yeshaya saw it in Eretz Yisrael. So why does that a difference? So maybe because Yechezkel was just more astounded that he saw it in Chutz La'aretz. But Tosfos also says no. If the villager sees the king, the villager comes back and says, "I saw the king." Everybody will say, "Yeah, right." So they're going to say, "Oh no, let me tell you," and he has to give a lot of description so people will believe him that he was really there. So because Yechezkel saw it in Chutz La'aretz, nobody was going to believe he had this vision, so he had to give a lot of description. Okay, let's read just a little bit more. Amar Reish Lakish said Reish Lakish, "My dechsiv." What's meant by the verse? Ashir Lashem ki ga'o ga'a. I will praise to God because He has been most high and whatever. So Shira lemi shemitga'eh al hageim. A song to the one that is more proud over the proud. Like God is above all of the pride and all of the glory of all the kings. Damamar Melech, and now we're going to explain what specifically it means. The geim of the other things on the earth. All those that have a sense of dominion and pride on the earth, God is above them. The Amar Mar, Melech Shebechayot, who is king of the beasts? Ari, the lion. Melech Shebehemot, who is king over the domesticated animals? Shur, the ox. Melech Shebofot, king of the birds? Nesher, which we translate as ego, but probably means vulture. Anyway, V'adam Mika'el Ehem, and the human being is king over all of the creatures. God is above all of them, because that's why God's chariot, right, had the face of the human, the eagle / vulture, the ox, and the lion. The Akol Olam Kulo, and over all the entire universe. Now, one word verse about the images of these things that were on the divine chariot, divine throne. So one says, by Yechezkel, the appearance of their face, Pnei Adam, Pnei Aryeh, Elei Amin La'arbatam, Pnei Shor Me'asmo La'arbatam. So basically their faces were human, lion, ox, and eagle, vulture. But another verse in Yechezkel says, Barbar Panim Lahema, Pnei Achad, Pnei Kruv, Pnei Asheni, Pnei Adam, Bashmishi, Pnei Ayar, V'Arvi, Pnei Nesher. Instead of the ox, it has a kruv, a cherub. So what happened to the ox? The ilu shur lo chashiv. It doesn't have the ox. So Amar Reish Lakish, Yechezkel bikesh alav rachamim b'hafachol lekruv. Yechezkel prayed that, and the ox on God's divine chair transformed into a kruv, into a cherub. Amar Lefanov, he said to him, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, Chateger Yaseh Sanegor? Should the one that the accusing attorney be the defense attorney? So the shor reminds you of the Chet HaEgel. So that thing of the Chet HaEgel, that should not be up in heaven. So God, he transformed it to a keruv in order that God would be more sort of compassionate to us. Reminds you of David praying to God to transform things. So it's amazing, right? The power, if you think about it. On the one hand, God is so transcendent, or hundreds of thousands of miles so transcendent, but the human being's prayers can transform the very look of the divine throne and what goes on in the divine heaven. Okay, and very last line we'll read for now. My kruv, what is a kruv? Amar Rabbi Avo, karavya, like a child. Shekaim bevav, according to Yanuka Ravya. In Babylonia, they called a child a ravya. So that's what it means, a child. This is how we certainly imagine what the cherubs look like, these childlike images. Amalei Rav Papa Abaye, Elamiyata T'chsi Pnei Echad Pnei Kruv, Pnei Hasheni Pnei Adam, Vashlishi Pnei Aryeh, V'Arvi Pnei Nesher. So how could one be a cherub and one be a human? You said that those are both humans. Hainu Pnei Kruv, Hainu Pnei Adam. So the face of a kruv is the face of a human. So he says, no, Afi Ravi Vafi Zutri. No, there's an old face and a young face. So there's a face of an adult person, and then there's the face of a child, and those are the two faces instead of the face of an ox. Okay, that we will end there for now. All right.
We're a little behind.
Just a little.